Okay, so good day all of you, and welcome to B2C Tutorials. Today, I would want us to discuss briefly on working capital management or management of working capital. So working capital basically is looking at your current assets and then looking at your current liabilities. So it is current assets minus your current liabilities. That gives you what we call your working capital. Okay. Now, having said that, what are current assets? These are items that the organization owns. That is owns. And the other side of it is what the organization owe. That is the liability. So when we say you are liable, that means you are in debt, you owe. Now, anything called current asset or current liability, current means that within a period of 1 year, within a period 1 year. So it doesn't go beyond a year. Okay. So those you owe that you are supposed to pay within a year. And then the liability assets is those you owe, those that owe you or you own, that for within a period of 1 year, you can easily convert them to cash. All right. So a few examples listed would see how it says. So working capital is usually defined as your current assets less your current liability. That is your creditors within 1 year, and then the assets that you own within 1 year. Now, what are the major elements of a current asset? So a few things under current assets we can talk about. We call them stock, and another name for stock, like we all know, is inventory. Stock basically is what the company sells or deals in. So inventory basically is what the company deals in. And at the end of the period, what is left is what goes to current liability assets. So an example is you deal in computers. Maybe at the beginning of the year, you had 5 computers. Beginning of the year, you had 5 computers. You bought some from your supplier, say 10, and then at the end of the year, you were able to sell just 5 out of it, or let's say 7 out of it. What is left at the end of the year is what you take to your current asset because they are for you. They are yours. So you need to keep them in your asset book for that period. So you can easily convert them to cash. That is one thing. You can easily convert them to cash. So the 8 computers that are outstanding would be the stock or the inventory that would form part of your current asset in your balance sheet. Then we have trade debtors. These are people you sell your item or your stocks to, and then they buy them, but then they do not have the ready cash to pay them. Then we come to cash in hand or the one at the bank. So your cash that you have at the office or the one you have at the bank at the end of the year, that's constitute your current asset. How do you manage these three major elements of your current assets? They will come to major elements of your liabilities. We have creditors, those you buy on a credit basis from, and you owe them and you have to sort them out. Then we have the overdraft. Overdraft, like I explained, that you have an amount of money with the bank, say 2,000, but you need 10,000 to run your business. So just like I was explaining for bank overdraft, I mean bank overdraft basically is looking at, say you have 2,000 in your account, you need 10,000 from your bank, and then the bank decides to give you the 8,000 excess to the 2,000 to go and manage it, and then you are supposed to pay within a space of 1 year. That is what we call an overdraft. So you've overdrawn your account. You have taken more than you have in your account. Sometimes it comes in the form of a loan that the company is, because you have an account with the bank, they decide to give you money to go and use in running your business, and at the end of the day, you pay. So loans or bank overdrafts that are repayable within a period of 1 year as the major element of your liabilities. So we'll pick this major element of your liabilities and discuss them one after the other. So he says that the size and composition of your working capital can vary between industries. A group of firms with similar interest constitute what we call the industry. So if latest foam merges with bitter foams, merges with ash foams, they are called maybe the foam industry. Now they are saying that this working capital varies. Large institutions will deal with large stocks, large debtors, and then would have huge cash. But then a sole proprietor like myself would not have these required debtors coming to buy from me. Assuming I'm managing a provision shop, imagine a number of people that would come to the provision shop to actually purchase on a credit basis and then become my debtors. And then imagine the number of people that will go to and buy on a credit basis from them so that they'll become my creditors. These people would be minimal. So the size of the working capital is different according to the industry we find ourselves. So for some type of business, the investment in working capital can be substantial. For example, a manufacturing company will invest heavily in raw materials, work in progress, and finished goods, and will often sell goods on credit, thereby incurring trade debtors. So someone with a provision shop would not like to sell on a credit basis to the people. So all you hear is that cash and then no return, something like that. Even the pharmaceuticals, you get it. But then those who are actually into manufacturing, you realize that they can sell on credit basis. An example is latest from Ghana. They will sell on a credit basis to their customers. And then also those who are actually also into, let's say, the Indomie, you realize that because it's a manufacturing company and it's that huge, they sell to people on a credit basis. A retailer, on the other hand, will hold only one form of stock, that is the finished goods. So this type of stocks held by the manufacturing company, because they do the production themselves, they have a material called raw material. The material they have worked on. So I want to produce bed. I would go and buy crude oil, buy some items that I'll use. These are the raw material. Or I'm producing bread. When I buy the flour, I buy the yeast, the sugar, the milk, the nutmegs. These are raw materials. When I fit them, it becomes a work in progress. And then when I put them in the oven to complete them, they become the finished goods. Okay. Now, if that is the case, because the bread making is a manufacturing company, it has different type of materials. But then when I come to the person who is going to sell the bread, that person is called a retailer. That person would sell only finished goods, would not have raw materials. But the finished goods become like a raw material to them. And that is it. Okay. So quickly, let's skip to some few parts that I want to touch on. The stock, management of the stock or inventory. How do you manage the stock? And that is the focus, management of working capital. So you are managing the element of the asset, managing the element of the liabilities. And then that is what we want to take them one after the other. So we take them from stock, and then stock, I've already explained stock, what is stock, to the last one, which happens to be cash. So we go from stock, we come to trade debtors, and we come to, so I'll be highlighting a few things in there too as well. It says, where a business holds stocks simply to meet the day-to-day requirement of its customers and production, it will normally seek to minimize the amount of stock held. So if they are into selling of the stocks, they will not want to keep more stock. They would want to keep fewer stock. So it will normally seek to minimize the amount of stock they hold, because there are significant costs associated with holding the stocks. So if I am going to hold the stocks, if I'm not going to sell them and I want to keep excess of it, I'll be paying for storage and handling cost. That is the storage facility that I'll be keeping them. I'll be paying for some finance cost. That is some maybe cleaning, dusting of it. I might have to think about people going to steal, and I might also have to think about the thing becoming so bad. So those who printed textbook 2, 3 years ago realized that there was a change of syllabus. So if they hold a lot of stock, the syllabus becomes outdated and becomes obsolete. So it's the same with stock. So you might think of people going to steal you, and then also the thing becoming outdated for holding more stock. And then the opportunity for going in tying up funds in this form of asset. That is, you have invested all the cash that you have in the stock because you are holding more stock. But then if you manage it very well, you realize that you don't need to keep lots of stocks to manage your handling, the finance costs, the risk of being pilferage, and then the obsolescence. And then also you can do other investments to be able to hold up these funds. It says, however, a business must also recognize that if the level of stock held is too low, there will be associated costs such as, so you don't need to keep too many stock to incur this cost. Neither are you supposed to keep too low stock to be able to get this kind of cost associated. It says loss of sales from being unable to provide the goods required immediately. So people would want to buy from you. All right. So, sorry, I had to look at something. We talk about cost associated with keeping low stock. We're saying loss of sales. You know, when you keep low stock and then you have a customer come in and want to purchase more than what you have in stock, it will take a while to produce, and then you might end up losing a customer, which will lead to loss on sales. You might also have to lose your goodwill because if anytime a customer comes to you and then wants to buy from you, and then you're unable to supply the demand, the good name that you have made, you begin to lose it. And then goodwill is as a result of a good name that you have made out there. So assuming you place an order to KFC all the time, and then KFC keeps telling you that they don't have stock, all you get to know is that KFC is not serious about it, and then you will not buy from them again. Then we have high transportation costs incurred to ensure that stocks are replenished quickly. Lost, you'd because you want the stocks to come in so that you can supply customers, you might negotiate on the terms of transporting or moving the items from your warehouse to where you need to sell it at a high cost because you really need to get it at that point in time, or from your supplier to get it to you. Then you have loss of production owing to shortage of raw materials, insufficient production scheduling due to shortages. We have purchased stocks at higher prices than may otherwise have been necessary in order to replenish the stock quickly. Then wasted production runs in a restart situation. So these are some of the situations in which your stocks, if you keep too high stocks, the cost you incur. If you keep too low cost, some costs you'll be incurring. Now it says that in practice, a number of procedures and techniques, the word is procedures and techniques that may be employed to manage stocks. So how do you manage stocks? There are a variety of ways of which you can manage stocks. You can manage stocks by doing what we call a forecast of the future demand. How does this happen? In order for there to be stock available to meet future sales, a business must produce appropriate forecast. How do they do the forecast? The forecast should deal with each product line. It is very important that every attempt is made to ensure the accuracy of these forecasts, as they will determine the future ordering and production level. These forecasts may be derived in various ways. They may be deployed using statistical techniques. You can do this using some computations, or you can do this forecast using what the sales and marketing team will be telling you with respect to what the customers need. So you now have to manage your stock based on some forecast you'll be doing with some statistical techniques, or using some judgment from the sales or marketing department. You can also manage your stock using what we call the financial ratios, which we've discussed under the financial analysis, by looking at your average stock held. The average stock held was your opening stock plus your closing stock, all divided by 2, because there are 2 items involved. That will give you your average stock over the cost of sales. We decided to look at what cost of sales is. So cost of sales multiplied by 365. So if you've forgotten what cost of sales is, it is your opening stock plus any purchases or production minus your closing stock. This will give you your cost of sales. So if I divide my average stock, that is my opening stock, the stock I began the year with, and then the stock that I am left with, if I find the average, I'll divide it by the cost of sales. That is looking at my opening stock, my plus purchases minus the cost of sales, closing stock, which will give me the cost of sales. Then I'll multiply by 365 days. It tells me the number of times that I would be placing an order for the stock, and that is the financial ratios to manage my stock. So I'll be able to tell the number of stocks, the number of days I would keep for me to place an order. Okay, so that is using the financial ratios to manage the stock. So another technique for managing your stock is what we call the recording and then reordering system. So taking records of the stock and then knowing when to order for stock using that system is also another technique. And then another technique is what we call the level of control. The level of control using the ABC method, how to keep your stock. So we know that management must make a commitment to the management of stock. However, the cost of controlling stocks must be weighed against the potential benefit. It may be possible to have different levels of control. A business may find that it is possible to divide its stock into three broad categories. So a business must divide its stock under the level of control into three broad categories. Looking at the ABC, A is looking at items that are really expensive. So category A stocks will represent the high value items. These things are very expensive. And then once they are expensive, they have what we call less quantity in stock. So expensive items that are category A items have less quantities in stock. So it may be the case, however, that although the items are high in value and represent a high proportion of the total value means the amount of stock held, they are relatively small proportion of the total volume, the total quantity of the stock. So maybe I am into automobiles and then I bring in cars to sell. So I would keep, let's say, different types of cars. We have the saloon cars, we have the tractors, and then we have the graders. You know, the graders are quite expensive compared to the saloon cars. But then if I keep 4 of the graders, the price of it is even more than keeping 20 of the saloon cars. And that is what they are saying, that you can decide to keep few quantities, but then the prices alone are more than keeping the category B. So category B will fall in between. It says there are less valuable items held. Perhaps 30% of the total value of the stock may be account for 25% of the total value of the stocks held. So like I was using graders and then trucks and then saloon cars. Trucks can be category B items. Then we have categorizing stock. This would help you. So the category C items, they are less in value, but then the quantities that you keep are more. That is looking at the level of control by categorizing your stocks into 3 items. Then we have what we call the stock management model. You also do stock management model using the economic order quantity. So under the stock management model, you use the EOQ, and then you know what the EOQ is. You need to know the demand, annual demand, you need to know the holding cost, and you need to know the ordering cost. So it tells you a few things about the economic order quantity and what it is. These are the 5 techniques that you can use to manage your stock. Now, another thing we need to look at is what we call the material requirement planning, MRP. Material requirements planning system takes as its starting point forecast of sales demand. It then uses computer technology to help schedule the timing of deliveries of both in parts and materials to coincide with the production requirement to meet the demand. So these are buying items to come and then meet the production so that they can actually produce. Then we come to the just-in-time stock management. Just-in-time stock management basically started in the US, but then it is now widely adopted by the Japanese business. The Reason for using this is because to have supplies delivered to a business just in the time for them to be used in production. So just at the end of what we have, they bring in the new material so that we can use them for production. And that is very risky because what if your materials get finished and then the suppliers are unable to supply? What happens to you? So that is, as the name says, they supply you as and when you need. No, they supply you exactly when you are done using the previous one they supply you. In order for this approach to be successful, it is important for businesses to inform suppliers of its production plans and requirements in advance for the suppliers to deliver the materials of the right quality at the agreed times. Failure to do this could lead to dislocation of production and could be very costly. So if you don't provide them with the required information that they need, you would end up not getting them supply at the right time for you to be able to continue with your production. Now, this is all about management of stock. Then the next asset we all know needs to be management of debtors, and we know who debtors are. Say selling goods on credit to very widespread and appears to be the norm outside the retail. When a business offers to sell its goods or services on credit, it must have clear policies concerning which customers should receive the credit, how much credit should be offered, what length of credit it is prepared to offer, whether discounts will be offered for prompt payment, and then what collection policies should be adopted, how the risk of non-payment can be reduced. These are the factors that you need to consider when you want to give your goods to someone. So each of these issues will be discussed below. Which customer should receive the goods? So to be able to know which customer you want to give the goods to, you must look at the 5 C's. The 5 C's. So to determine who a customer is before you supply the goods to, the 5 C's must come in mind. And the 5 C's are, you need to know the capital. The customer must appear to be financially sound before any credit is extended. So to define who a customer is, someone who is financially sound or a company that is financially what? Sound. Now, capacity. He has the capacity or the payment record of the business should be examined by looking at the type of business as well as its physical resources to check the capacity of the business to pay. So the capacity is looking at whether they can pay the items you are giving them. You don't give me a grader thinking that I can pay because, I am financially sound. I can't pay for the grader for now because I would not have the capacity to pay. Then collateral, they should bring you some form of securities. Even if you are giving them the car, you need to take some collateral like a document, or you need to take something like a security to support it. And that is the next thing. So if the person has the capacity to pay, has the required capital, has the collateral, the person must have a condition. The condition is that the state of the industry in which the customer operates and the general economic condition of the particular region or country may have an important influence on the ability of the customer. So looking at the person, if the person is in the banking sector, would you want to give the items to him? If the person is in education center or education sector, would you want to give your items to the person? Then you also look at the last one being the character. It is important for a business to make some assessment of the character of the customer. In a case of a limited company, they would mean assessing the characters of the directors. When we say limited companies, we are looking at companies that they float shares for people to buy, and then they have directors. So you need to know the attitude of the directors before you give the items to them. So having discussed which customer should receive it, considering the 5 C's, you need to know how much credit you should give to them. You need to know that how much credit you should give to them. So how much credit should be offered? Once a customer is considered credit wealthy, a credit limit for the customer should be established. So maybe you can't take more than 50,000 items from my company. You can't take more than 20,000 items from my company. That is the credit limit they are talking about. Unfortunately, there are no theories or models to help a business decide on the appropriate credit limit. So it is really your matter of judgment as a firm that looking at the customer, can the customer pay the required items? Then you now look at the length of credit period, the number of days or times involved. A business must determine what length of credit it is prepared to offer its customers. This can be very significantly between businesses can vary significantly between businesses and is influenced by such factors. So the type of credit terms operating within the industry, the degree of the competition within the industry, the bargaining power of a particular customer, the risk of non-payment, the capacity of the business to offer credit to customers, and then the marketing strategy that will determine the number of days or period you want the customer to enjoy. Then we have the next one to be cash discount. A business may decide to offer cash discount in order to encourage prompt payment for its credit customers. So someone will want to buy from you, and then you tell the person if he can pay within 10 days, he's going to enjoy 10% discount. This is a form of enticing them to bring the payment to you. And the next thing is looking at the collection policy. So a business offering credit should ensure that the amount owing collected as quickly as possible. Various steps can be taken to achieve this, including the following: developing the customer relationship, especially with the key staff responsible for paying the sales invoice. So the account staff, you must develop some relationship with them so that they can be paying. And then you should be sending them the invoices from time to time so that they can be paying. So how you want to do your collection process, and then also reducing the risk of non-payment. How do you reduce the risk of non-payment? Efficient collection policies are important in reducing the risk of non-payment. A business can reduce this type of risk through requiring customers to pay part of the sales value in advance of the goods being sent. So let's use the classes as an example. Now we do classes for you, and some people will come in and be like, we can pay at the end of the month once you are paid. How do we reduce this risk of these people not paying? We can tell them, okay, so you pay 20%, you pay 30%, you pay 50% of the amount of money that we are charging you. Then when you receive your salary, you bring the others. So these are some of the things we also need to consider. And then the next one says that requiring a third-party guarantee from a financially sound business, such as a bank or a parent company. So you want to join a class, and then you'll be like, oh, you can even talk to my mom. I'll give you the details of my mom or my dad so that anytime I'm unable to pay, you call him and then follow up. This is giving us a third party. So aside paying part of the money, you can give us a guarantor to ensure that we reduce the risk of non-payment. So this is with debtors. Debtors. So considering debtors, you are looking at who the customer is, the credit period, that is the credit, how much credit limit you should give them. The period is the next, the discount, then the collection policy, as well as how to reduce the risk of they not being paid. This is how to manage the debtors. Then we come down to cash. Cash. So the similar questions: explain management of debtors. You need to tell us the um, who a customer is, their credit limit, the period. That is the explanation you need to put together. And then they can ask you for the 5 C's. So an example will be the following are the 5 C's of a customer under the management of a custom debtor, with the exception of the following. And then they can list capital, capacity, collateral, and then they can list condition. So when they take the S or they write charter, CARTER. When they write charter, you should know the one that is not as part of the 5 customers. So these are the examinable areas we can also look at. Then the next item will be cash. 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 If you keep too much cash in the company, it's bad. If you keep too less cash in the company, it's bad. So you need to manage your cash in the organization at the end of the day. But then why would you keep cash? Why would you hold cash? You hold cash for 3 purposes or 3 motives: to be able to transact or transaction motive, precautionary motive, and then speculative motive. So transaction is that you are keeping the cash to be able to meet the day-to-day commitments, such as the payment of salaries, expenses, to buy goods, and then to pay certain dues at dates. And then also precautionary, you are keeping the cash for an unexpected situation. You don't expect the situation to happen. and therefore you are keeping the cash. And then you do for speculative motive, that is for an expected situation. So they can ask you, what are the three motives for holding cash? They are transaction, precautionary, speculative, and then they add the next one. And then you know that which of the following is not a motive for holding cash? Or they can list an explanation. If future cash flows are uncertain for any reason, it would be prudent to hold a cash balance. So uncertain is unexpected, then that means that it is a precautionary motive. And then we can have the speculative motive, and then they can tell you an expected situation being a speculative motive. And so how much cash should be held, that one, it is difficult to take a decision on that. But then it is dependent on the following. The nature of the business will determine the cash you hold, the opportunity cost of holding the cash. If you hold the cash, what have you let go? So where there are profitable opportunities, it may be wiser to invest in those opportunities than to hold the cash. So if I am holding cash and then maybe I have to buy a car and sell it and make a profit, and I keep on holding the cash, then I'm not being wise. But then if I want to trade and manage the cash, I should be able to invest it within a shorter period and require my money. So the availability of the near liquid asset. If a business has marketable securities or stocks which may equally be liquidated, then the amount of cash held may be reduced. So if I have something that I can easily sell within 1 year and make cash, I don't need to keep too much cash. I can do that. I can keep less cash and then manage that security. And then the availability of borrowing. If a business can borrow easily, if we can borrow easily, then why do I have to keep cash? I need to let go of my cash and then use them for the business. Then it says the interest rate or the cost of borrowing. When the interest rates are too high, the option of borrowing becomes less attractive. That means you need to keep your what? Your cash. So why you need to keep cash or why you need to use the cash is based on the following factors that are listed. But then there are three motives why you'd have to keep cash, and that is the only thing that we have to talk about under the cash management. And then you also look at the operating cash cycles. The operating cash cycle is basically looking at your average stock turnover period plus your average settle period for debtors minus your average payment period for creditors. So your stock period, then those who owes you, as you know, it is trade debtors divided by sales multiplied by 365 days. And then the creditors, like we know, trade creditors, this is credit sales. So be mindful. And then the creditors will be trade creditors divided by your creditors, purchases, credit purchases, multiplied by 365 365 days. So these are how you want to do it. This one we already know, that is the average stock divided by the cost of sales. This one, average stock divided by cost of sales, multiplied by 365 days. When you add this, you'll be able to tell the cash that you have cycle. You can be able to tell us the amount you have within that period or the minimum cash you can have within that period. Okay. So how to reduce it, you need to look at it yourself. Then the last one, we move to the liabilities. And the liabilities, we look at trade creditors. And then you know how to find trade creditors. Where would you pay back those people? Creditors are those you would have to pay. Those you would have to pay. And then we come to the bank overdraft. It says that bank overdrafts are a flexible form of borrowing and are cheap relative to other sources of finance. So these ones, it's a free and a cool chop. I've already explained them. How do you manage them? That's what you need to look at. And that will bring you to the end of working capital management. So, plus or minus, that is all about working capital management. Read more and then you'll be okay. I just wanted to give you an introduction and you'll be fine. Thank you. Have a good night and bye-bye. I wish you all the best in your exams and we'll talk more.